All right, it happened, and it's time to have that discussion. But how do you have a difficult conversation? Well, watch closely, and I'll show you how. All right, something's happened, right? Now it's time for that tough, difficult conversation. I know, believe me, I know. It's easier to avoid it, right? You don't want to have the conversation, you don't want to have to talk to them because what are they going to say? What are you going to say? Is this just going to make it a bigger mess? What do you do? How do you do this? Because you know if you don't have this tough conversation, you know the problem's going to get worse. You've seen it happen before. You've probably experienced this before, and maybe you're just not good at it. But you know if you don't have the conversation, it's going to get worse. It's going to get messy, and then it just gets, blown off, and nothing ever happened. And now you're going to go right into the next situation, and it's going to happen again. Well, maybe today's a good day to do something different. I think what you need to do is you need to be a little bit more prepared about this conversation and have a plan so that you can walk into this difficult conversation and really feel confident about where it's going to go. So let's talk about some steps here about how to prepare and organize for a difficult conversation. One of the first things you want to consider is what is the outcome you want to have happen. Now, instead of just thinking about the outcome, I think what you got to do is get a pad of paper out and literally write down some bullet points of how you want this to turn out. Because you know how if you keep it in your mind, it kind of can change and get twisted, and maybe you get into the conversation and you forget what the outcome really is. But it's really smart to literally on paper write down the outcome of how this is going to be. So when you get into the conversation, if you ever get a little emotional and your thoughts get twisted up, you can come back to your pad of paper and go, oh yeah, that's right. This is where we're going. This is how it's going to turn out. And I'm going to stay on my plan and on my course here of having this difficult conversation. So write down the outcome. Second is to seriously consider what you want the relationship to be like after this difficult conversation. So, many people get into a conversation and they start to think, oh, they're going to be mad, they're going to leave, we're going to ruin this relationship, they're going to be gone forever. But that's all options. When you have to do or have a tough or a difficult conversation, if you don't, really think this through about how I want to have this relationship, what this relationship is going to be like afterwards, then it could be messy and you could lose that relationship. So, next little paragraph on your pad of paper, you decide how the relationship is going to be after the conversation. This helps your mind focus so that as you get into the conversation, you don't veer off and just get emotionally triggered and then it just turns out however it's going to turn out. And seriously, how many times have you heard yourself say this or heard somebody else say this? Oh, let's just see how it turns out. Boy, that doesn't sound very sure and confident. I mean, that sounds like it probably is going to turn out messy. I know that when you're planned and prepared, there's a higher chance of it turning out well. So this is you planning and preparing. Little paragraph about, or some bullet points about how you want it to turn out as the outcome. A couple bullet points of how you want the relationship to be after the conversation. Okay, next in your planning is literally chart or diagram out on your pad of paper how you want the conversation to go. Because in this tough conversation, you've got to bring this up, and you got to bring this up, and you got to bring this up. Usually there's a couple different components. So you can write it as a number like number 1, number 2, number 3, or you could draw like a little timeline and go, okay, we got to talk about this, then it's going to lead into this, and then it's going to lead into this. Again, what you're doing is you're charting this conversation out before you have it. Because when they get triggered emotionally, you could get triggered emotionally and you could get lost. Chart it out or diagram it out of how you want that conversation to happen step by step. So you cannot lose the path, you stay on the path. Next, be open. It's their perception and your perception, right? There's multiple perceptions of what happened. misunderstandings and things like this happen all the time. And really consider, you may be missing some details in what happened. You could be part of what happened and you didn't know it. So I think a good rule of thumb is go into this conversation open to listen. Because if you go in just all, hunkered down and just like determined that you're right and they're wrong, you might not be able to work it out. But just have this in your mind that you're going to be open and listen to their point of view and what happened in this situation. Now, consider this, that whatever happens in the conversation, that the conversation is going to come down to some action steps. Because if at the end of the conversation it does not come down to some action steps, then it was only a conversation. But you're probably going to have some action steps, they're probably going to have some action steps, and then there needs to be a time to check back in with each other, the next day or a couple days from then. But if you go into this conversation without thinking of what you're going to get to, then the conversation could just be, I call it mushy in the end. So for me, it's like, okay, where's the action steps in this? What are they gonna do? What am I gonna do? How are we gonna check in with each other? How are we gonna make this better? But we gotta have some action steps. So if you look at this is a plan. It's literally a plan about how to go into the conversation so you're organized. So if you do get emotional, you can come back to the plan. You can come back to, where the conversation was to go. You're gonna remind yourself to be open, and you literally are gonna find what must be done from this point on. When you go into it being prepared, I really believe you're putting yourself in a position for it to turn out better. Because isn't that what you want? You want it to turn out better in the end, not bad like it is right now or tough like it is right now. And believe me, I've had a lot of tough, difficult conversations in my life. And if I just walk into emotionally charged, the conversation goes in so many different directions. They take it one way, I take it another way, and then it's too many emotions flying around. And we're not getting anywhere. But this is a great plan to follow. And whatever is said in the discussion, have a pad of paper in front of you and slow down the discussion and take notes. Even give the other person a pad of paper and a pen and say, you know what? I want you to write down the notes of what we're going to discuss about today so that we both don't get lost in this. Because when you get off the notes and you get off of what you're doing here, then now you're stepping into the emotional side of this. And that can really distort the facts and distort the content. And now nobody knows really what kind of facts and content to pay attention to. So to keep it in a place where you're going to be organized and sort through this conversation, and for it to turn out well, have a plan. Take those action steps, my friend. I know you enjoyed the content, but go have those difficult conversations, And don't leave me out of your life. Let's move on to the next training. Hit subscribe. Let's stay connected here and keep you in the know of what to do next in your life.